When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood before Congress and called Ben Shapiro a fascist propagandist enabling Trump's authoritarianism, she thought she'd won. She'd humiliated the conservative commentator in front of cameras, shown him who had real power, and landed a blow that would go viral across every progressive platform. She didn't expect him to smile and take notes. What happened next would become a masterclass in how calm logic destroys emotional manipulation. For 37 minutes, Shapiro systematically dismantled AOC's entire career without raising his voice, without personal attacks, with nothing but facts, evidence, and her own words. When he finished, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had nothing left but her Twitter account and a dying career. The House Oversight Committee hearing room felt different on October 28, 2025. The official subject was social media misinformation and congressional accountability. But everyone present understood this was really about political theater. The gallery was packed beyond capacity, split predictably down ideological lines. Young progressive activists wearing Bernie Sanders shirts and squad merchandise filled the left side. Phones already positioned for optimal recording angles. Conservative media representatives and political commentators occupied the right, notebooks out, recording devices ready. Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky surveyed the room with the resigned expression of someone who knew this hearing would generate more heat than light. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had been invited to testify about right-wing misinformation and its dangers to democracy, a subject on which she considered herself an expert, having been targeted by conservative media since her first campaign. What made this particular hearing different, what added an electric tension to the air, was the presence of Ben Shapiro. The conservative commentator, podcast host, and rapid-fire debater sat quietly in the third row of the gallery, wearing a dark suit and his yarmulke, a yellow legal pad balanced on his knee, pen in hand. At 39, Shapiro had built a media empire on the foundation of what he called facts and logic, an approach that made him a hero to conservatives and a villain to progressives who saw him as everything wrong with modern right-wing rhetoric. AOC had requested he be barred from the hearing. Chairman Comer had denied that request. What she didn't know, what would make the next hour devastatingly worse, was that Shapiro hadn't come just to observe. He'd been invited to testify as an expert witness on media and commentary. She was about to walk into a trap of her own making. The hearing began routinely enough. Comer gavelled the proceedings to order, introduced the topic, and invited Representative Ocasio-Cortez to provide her opening testimony. She stood with the practiced confidence of someone who'd mastered the art of the political performance, adjusted the microphone, and smiled directly at the cameras positioned throughout the room. "Thank you, Chairman Comer," she began, her voice carrying the mix of wounded dignity and defiant strength she'd perfected over years of public appearances. "I'm here today to discuss the very real dangers of right-wing misinformation in our media ecosystem. From Fox News to conservative podcasts to social media influencers, there's a coordinated effort to spread disinformation, to attack progressive voices, to undermine democracy itself." The progressive side of the gallery nodded along, some already composing tweets celebrating their champion's courage. Shapiro, meanwhile, wrote something on his legal pad, expression neutral, showing no reaction whatsoever. AOC continued through her prepared remarks, hitting the standard talking points about media bias, corporate influence, and the need for accountability. It was fine, professional, the kind of testimony that would generate some friendly headlines and maybe a few viral clips for her social media channels. And then she saw Shapiro taking notes, that slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, and something in her snapped. The opportunity was too perfect to resist. Here was one of her most prominent critics sitting right there, unable to respond in a setting where she had the microphone and the platform. The temptation to go off-script proved irresistible. "And speaking of misinformation," she said, her voice shifting, taking on an edge that made several committee members look up with sudden attention. "We have Ben Shapiro here today." She pointed directly at him, and every camera in the room swiveled to capture his reaction. He looked up from his notepad, met her gaze, and simply nodded once, politely, then went back to writing. The lack of visible reaction seemed to infuriate her more. "Mr. Shapiro represents everything dangerous about modern conservatism," she continued, voice rising with righteous anger. "He uses his platform to spread hatred, to attack women, people of color, Muslims, anyone who doesn't fit his narrow worldview. He enables fascism under the guise of facts and logic. He makes bigotry sound intellectual." Shapiro continued taking notes, his pen moving steadily across the legal pad. He didn't look up, didn't react, just wrote, that slight smile never quite leaving his face. AOC's voice grew louder, more passionate. "He's been a propagandist for Donald Trump, defending a man who incited insurrection, who attacks democracy daily, who represents everything un-American. And Mr. Shapiro gives him intellectual cover. He makes authoritarianism sound reasonable. He makes cruelty sound logical." She was fully committed now, the prepared remarks forgotten, the camera-ready performance transforming into genuine aggression. "You hide behind your Ivy League education, Mr. Shapiro, behind your fast-talking debate tactics. But what you really do is provide cover for bigotry. You make racism sound intellectual. You make sexism sound like logic. You dress up hatred in a suit and call it commentary." The progressive gallery was on its feet, applauding, cheering. This was what they'd come for. Their champion, calling out one of conservative media's biggest names, speaking truth to power, showing courage in the face of right-wing propaganda. Then AOC went further, crossing a line she'd later desperately wish she could take back. "And as a Jewish man, you should know better. You should understand persecution. You should recognize fascism when you see it. Yet you enable it, defend it, profit from it. You've chosen to align yourself with forces that history will judge harshly." She pointed at him again, finger jabbing the air for emphasis. "You're not a journalist, Mr. Shapiro. You're not even a commentator. You're a propagandist for fascism. You're dangerous to democracy, and you're here today because Republicans want to give a platform to your hatred." She sat down to a standing ovation from the progressive side of the gallery. Phones captured every angle of her triumph, already uploading clips with captions like, "AOC destroys Ben Shapiro," and "Watch AOC call out right-wing propaganda." Squad members in attendance beamed with pride. She'd done it. She'd humiliated one of their biggest critics in front of Congress and the nation. AOC looked toward Shapiro, expecting to see him red-faced, angry, flustered, defensive. Instead, she found him still writing on his legal pad, completely unmoved by her attack. He finished whatever note he was making, capped his pen with deliberate precision, and looked up. Their eyes met across the hearing room, and Ben Shapiro smiled. Not a smirk, not a sneer, just a small, knowing smile. Then he placed his pen carefully on top of his legal pad and folded his hands. A picture of calm composure. He looked like someone who'd just been handed an unexpected gift and was already planning exactly how to use it. Chairman Comer cleared his throat and, for the first time since AOC had started her attack, spoke. Representative Ocasio-Cortez. That was quite unexpected. He paused, consulted his notes, then delivered the line that made AOC's confident expression crack for the first time. Mr. Shapiro is actually scheduled to testify today as an expert witness on media commentary and political discourse. The color drained from AOC's face. She hadn't known. She'd attacked him thinking he was just audience, unable to respond, forced to sit there and take it. But he was about to get his own microphone, his own time, his own opportunity to respond. And judging by the way he stood up, gathered his legal pad, and walked calmly toward the witness table, Ben Shapiro had been planning this response for quite some time. Ben Shapiro approached the witness table with unhurried precision. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, the physical manifestation of someone who'd built a career on the foundation of staying calm, while everyone around him lost their composure. He carried a manila folder in addition to his legal pad, and as he sat down and adjusted the microphone, the folder's label became visible to the cameras. Alexandria's Record. AOC sat frozen in her seat, still officially a witness, unable to leave, forced to watch as the man she'd just spent 5 minutes attacking prepared to respond. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. The progressive gallery, which had been so jubilant moments before, now sat in uncertain silence, sensing that something had gone wrong with their champion's performance. When Shapiro spoke, his voice carried none of AOC's emotional fury. Instead, it had the rapid-fire precision he was famous for. Words delivered so quickly, they almost blurred together, yet somehow remaining perfectly clear. Each syllable distinct. It was the vocal equivalent of a machine gun, and just as devastating. "Thank you, Chairman Comer," he began, looking not at AOC but at the committee. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez just spent several minutes attacking me personally. She called me a fascist, a propagandist, an enabler of bigotry. She questioned my integrity, my character, even my relationship with my Jewish faith." He stated these facts flatly, without defensiveness, like a lawyer reading charges into the record. "She's entitled to her opinion about me." He paused, adjusted his glasses, then delivered his first strike. "But since Representative Ocasio-Cortez chose to make this personal, since she decided to turn a hearing about media accountability into an attack on my character, I think it's only fair that we examine her record. Because unlike opinions about commentators, facts are not negotiable." Shapiro placed his hand on the manila folder, and that small smile returned. "And facts, as I often say, don't care about your feelings." The conservative side of the gallery laughed appreciatively at the signature line. The progressive side shifted uncomfortably. AOC stared at the folder, trying to figure out what was in it, what he had, what was coming. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez attacks me for being what she calls a Trump propagandist," Shapiro continued, his delivery accelerating. "She claims I enable authoritarianism. She suggests I'm dangerous to democracy. These are serious charges, so let's examine who's actually dangerous. Let's look at her actual record, not her Twitter rhetoric, not her Instagram activism, but her actual impact on real people." He held up 3 fingers. "I'm going to present 3 categories of evidence. First, financial corruption. Second, economic devastation. Third, constituent abandonment." Each finger lowered as he named the category. Not opinions, not feelings, not rhetoric. Facts, documents, her own words, and testimony from people whose lives she's destroyed through her narcissism and neglect. The framework established, Shapiro leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on an edge of controlled intensity. Representative Ocasio-Cortez attacked my character, questioned my integrity, suggested I profit from hatred. So let's discuss who's actually profiting and from what. He opened the manila folder with careful precision, revealing what appeared to be dozens of pages of documentation. When I'm done, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, he said, looking directly at her for the first time since beginning his testimony, you're going to wish you'd stuck to your prepared remarks about right-wing misinformation instead of making this personal. His gaze returned to the documents. Let's begin. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, sitting at that witness table with nowhere to run and no way to stop what was coming, understood with terrible clarity that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. She'd poked the bear, and the bear was about to maul her with facts. Shapiro pulled the first document from his folder with the precision of a surgeon selecting an instrument. Riley Roberts, he began, and AOC visibly flinched at the name. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's longtime boyfriend, now husband. Let's discuss how she's enriched him using campaign funds donated by people who thought they were supporting democratic socialism. He placed several pages of documents on the table, FEC, filing records clearly visible. Since 2018, Representative Ocasio-Cortez's campaign has paid Mr. Roberts's LLC over $6 million. $6 million? He let that number hang in the air, expand, fill the space. Listed uniformly as marketing consulting services, Shapiro's delivery accelerated into his signature rapid-fire mode. So, let's examine what Mr. Roberts actually produced to justify $6 million in payments. I had my research team conduct a comprehensive search. We looked for websites he built, campaign materials he designed, digital strategies he implemented, social media campaigns he created. Any deliverable product that would justify even a fraction of $6 million. He looked up from the documents directly at AOC. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, can you name one website Riley Roberts built for your campaign? She opened her mouth to answer. Shapiro didn't let her. One campaign advertisement he created? She tried again. One strategic document he produced? Her mouth closed. One piece of work product that justifies $6 million in campaign funds? The silence stretched. AOC's face flushed red. Shapiro waited exactly 5 seconds, long enough for the silence to become damning, not long enough for her to formulate an answer, then continued. We found nothing. 0 websites, 0 advertisements, 0 deliverables. $6 million for undefined consulting that produced no tangible results, no measurable outcomes, no work product of any kind. His voice carried prosecutorial precision. That's not consulting, Representative. That's a no-show job. That's putting your boyfriend on the campaign payroll and calling it marketing services to make it sound legitimate. Shapiro pulled out another document. Now, let's discuss how Representative Ocasio-Cortez's personal finances have evolved during her time in Congress. When she entered Congress in January 2019, her financial disclosure showed a net worth of approximately $7,000. Not much, certainly consistent with her narrative about being a working-class bartender struggling to make ends meet. He placed the document down, then pulled out another. Today, her reported net worth exceeds $2 million. $2 million in 6 years on a congressional salary of $174,000 per year. The math was simple enough that even the Progressive Gallery could do it. The numbers didn't add up through salary alone. Book deals worth 7 figures, Shapiro continued, ticking off items on his fingers with machine gun rapidity. Netflix documentary. Exact payment undisclosed, but estimated at $500,000 or more. Podcast sponsorships. speaking fees ranging up to $50,000 per appearance, all while calling herself a socialist fighting capitalism. She's made millions, millions from being Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the brand, the celebrity, the progressive icon. He leaned back, gestured to encompass the contradiction. Let me be crystal clear about this hypocrisy. Representative Ocasio-Cortez lives in a luxury apartment in Navy Yard that costs over $3,000 per month. 24-hour concierge, rooftop pool, wine bar. She drives a Tesla Model 3, 35 to $5 minimum. She wears designer clothes to every public event. She attended the Met Gala, ticket price $35, in a custom gown with "Tax the Rich" emblazoned on it, while surrounded by millionaires and billionaires. His delivery never slowed, never lost precision. She calls herself a socialist, but she lives like a capitalist. She attacks the wealthy while becoming wealthy from attacking them. She preaches about economic inequality while accumulating personal wealth that puts her in the top 5% of American earners. That's not socialism, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. That's grift. That's using progressive rhetoric to build a personal brand that enriches you, while people who believed in you get nothing. Movement in the gallery caught everyone's attention. A young woman in her early 20s stood slowly, wearing a faded red campaign shirt from AOC's first congressional run. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice when she spoke carried the clarity of someone who'd been waiting a long time to say this. "May I speak?" she asked, looking at Chairman Comer. Shapiro immediately gestured his support. "Please." The young woman stepped forward, and cameras captured the logo on her old shirt. Ocasio 2018, a movement for all. She looked at that shirt, then at AOC, and something in her expression suggested that the shirt meant something very different now than it had when she'd first put it on. "My name is Jennifer Martinez," she said, voice shaking with emotion barely held in check. "I volunteered for Representative Ocasio-Cortez's first campaign in 2018. That was when I believed she was different. When I thought she actually cared about working people. When I trusted that she meant what she said about fighting corruption and serving constituents instead of enriching herself." She pulled the shirt away from her body slightly, looked at it with something approaching disgust. "I worked 60 hours a week for her campaign. 60 hours, completely unpaid. Not underpaid, completely unpaid. I did phone banking until my voice was gone. I knocked on doors in the summer heat until my feet bled. I entered data until my eyes couldn't focus. I did this while working 3 part-time jobs to pay my rent and student loans because the campaign told us there was no money to pay volunteers." Her voice grew stronger, powered by anger that had been building for years. "They said we were building something bigger than money. That we were part of a revolution. That we were fighting the corrupt system that enriched politicians at the expense of regular people. I believed that. I sacrificed my health, my finances, my time, all because I believed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was different." Jennifer looked directly at AOC now, and her eyes held nothing but betrayal. Then I found out about Riley. Found out that while I was working for free, while hundreds of us were volunteering 60-hour weeks with no compensation, your boyfriend was getting millions of dollars in campaign funds for work that apparently no one can identify or document. You used us. You made us believe we were building something meaningful, but you were just running the same scam as every other politician. You just had better Instagram captions. She pulled the campaign shirt over her head in one angry motion, standing there in just a tank top underneath, and threw the shirt toward AOC's table. It landed in a crumpled heap on the polished wood. Bright red fabric, like an accusation, like a wound, like the death of hope. "I want nothing to do with you," Jennifer said, voice breaking. "Nothing. You're everything you claim to be fighting against. You're just better at marketing it." She sat down, and several other people in the progressive section of the gallery began quietly gathering their belongings and leaving. Not dramatically, just quietly exiting, unable to reconcile what they'd just heard with the image they'd believed in. Shapiro let the testimony settle before he continued. "Jennifer Martinez represents thousands of young people who believed in you. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, who worked for free while your boyfriend collected millions, who sacrificed for a cause while you built a brand, who thought they were fighting corruption while you were practicing it." He pulled another document from his folder. "But we're not done discussing your finances, because it's not just about how much you've made. It's about the spectacular hypocrisy of making millions from socialism while practicing capitalism, of attacking the wealthy while becoming wealthy, of preaching equality while living in luxury." Shapiro's voice carried a note of something approaching wonder at the audacity of it all. "You wrote a book about the Green New Deal, a piece of legislation that has accomplished precisely nothing in terms of actual policy, and received a $400,000 advance. You did a Netflix documentary about your first year in Congress and reportedly received over $500,000. You go on speaking tours where you charge $50,000 per appearance to tell college students about the evils of capitalism while you pocket their tuition money." He stacked the financial documents neatly, creating a physical representation of accumulated evidence. "You attack me, Representative, for profiting from conservative media. I built an audience through content creation. I provide commentary people choose to consume. You put your boyfriend on the campaign payroll for undefined work. You enriched yourself through government position while preaching about the evils of personal enrichment. Between the two of us, who's actually corrupt?" The question hung in the air, rhetorical but devastating. AOC couldn't answer it, couldn't defend herself, could only sit there while her financial hypocrisy was laid bare for everyone to see. And Shapiro, glancing at his notes, prepared to move to his second category of destruction. The financial corruption was damning, but the economic devastation she'd caused would be even worse. Shapiro flipped to a new section in his folder, and his voice took on a different quality. Less about personal corruption now, more about policy failure and its human cost. Let's shift from how Representative Ocasio-Cortez enriches herself to how she impoverishes others. Specifically, let's discuss Amazon HQ2 and the 25,000 jobs she killed for Twitter likes. He pulled out printed tweets, AOC's own words captured forever on the internet. February 2019. Amazon announced it was canceling plans to build its second headquarters in Queens, New York. 25,000 jobs. Average salary, $150,000. Billions in economic investment. The largest economic development opportunity in New York City's recent history. Shapiro held up the tweets, reading them in a voice that perfectly mimicked AOC's cadence without quite being cruel mockery. Just enough inflection to highlight the absurdity. Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated, everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed. That's what you tweeted, Representative. You celebrated. You called it a victory. You said you defeated corporate greed. His voice returned to its normal rapid-fire delivery. Let's discuss what you actually defeated. 25,000 union jobs. Good-paying working-class jobs with benefits and retirement plans. Construction jobs for the building phase. Service jobs for the operational phase. Small business opportunities for the restaurants and shops that would have served Amazon employees. Tax revenue that would have funded schools and infrastructure. Economic investment that would have transformed Queens. Shapiro placed the tweets down with the other evidence, building his case piece by piece. You killed all of that. Not through careful economic analysis, not through legitimate concerns about community impact, but because it felt good. Because opposing Amazon made you look revolutionary. Because attacking a major corporation played well with your base and got you media attention. He pulled out news articles documenting the aftermath. What happened to your district after Amazon left? Unemployment increased, business investment decreased, young professionals who would have moved to the area went elsewhere. The tax revenue that would have funded community programs never materialized. Queens went from being the site of one of the biggest economic development projects in the country to being a cautionary tale about what happens when politicians prioritize performance over results. A man in his 30s stood in the gallery wearing a union jacket with Local 3 IBEW DW emblazoned on the back. He was built like someone who worked with his hands, shoulders broad, posture straight, working class through and through. Shapiro gestured toward him. "Sir, would you like to speak?" The man stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried a thick Queen's accent. The real deal, not the version AOC sometimes affected for authenticity. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm a union electrician with Local 3. I've lived in the Bronx and Queens my whole life. I'm exactly the kind of working-class person Representative Ocasio-Cortez claims to represent." He pulled papers from his jacket pocket, unfolded them carefully. "These are my applications for the Amazon HQ2 construction project. I applied to work on the electrical systems. The project would have employed hundreds of union electricians like me for years. Good pay, union benefits, steady work, close to home. It would have changed my life and the lives of my neighbors." Marcus's voice grew harder, anger bleeding through the working-class dignity. "Then Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez killed it. Celebrated, killing it on Twitter, while I lost the opportunity to work in my own neighborhood. While thousands of other union workers lost opportunities. While our community lost billions in investment and tens of thousands of jobs." He held up the applications, now useless pieces of paper. "I have 2 kids. My daughter just started college. That Amazon job would have meant better pay, benefits, the ability to help her avoid crushing student debt. Instead, I'm working in Jersey City now. 2-hour commute each way. 4 hours a day on trains and buses because there's no good work left in my own district." Marcus pointed at AOC, and his voice rose with the anger of someone who had been betrayed by someone who claimed to represent him. "You didn't kill Amazon for us. You didn't do it to protect working people. You killed it for your image, for squad clout, for progressive street cred, for Twitter likes and Instagram followers. You destroyed 25,000 families' economic futures so you could feel revolutionary." He crumpled the applications in his fist. "I'm working class. Real working class, not the Instagram version. And you failed us. You made our lives harder, so yours could get easier. You sacrificed our opportunities for your celebrity." Marcus sat down heavily, and the gallery, even the progressive side that remained, sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a Republican attacking AOC. This wasn't a conservative commentator. This was a union electrician from Queens, the exact demographic she claimed to champion, telling her she'd betrayed him. Shapiro let the testimony settle before continuing. Marcus Thompson represents the real cost of Representative Ocasio-Cortez's performance activism, real jobs lost, real families damaged, real economic opportunity destroyed, all so she could have a viral moment opposing a major corporation. He pulled out more documents, and his voice took on a note of something approaching incredulity. But it gets worse, because Representative Ocasio-Cortez didn't just kill jobs in her district. She got rich from the policy that created no jobs. Let me introduce you to the Green New Deal, a piece of legislation that has accomplished precisely nothing except enriching Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Shapiro flipped through pages rapidly. The Green New Deal, introduced February 2019, promised millions of green jobs, economic transformation, climate salvation, the most ambitious environmental legislation in American history. That's how she sold it. That's how she marketed it to her constituents and to America. He looked up, and his voice dripped with disdain. Jobs created in her district by the Green New Deal. 0. Legislation passed. 0. Climate impact? 0. But here's what did happen. Representative Ocasio-Cortez wrote a book about the Green New Deal, $430,000 advance, did a speaking tour, $50,000 per appearance, became the face of climate activism, generating millions in personal income. Shapiro stacked the documents, each page another example of profiting from failure. The Green New Deal enriched exactly one person, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It created exactly one job, hers, as a celebrity progressive commentator who makes millions talking about policies that never materialize. She got rich from climate activism, while her constituents got forgetting. That's the real Green New Deal. Enrich Alexandria. Impoverish everyone else. He paused, adjusted his glasses, and delivered his transition to the final section with surgical precision. So, we've established that Representative Ocasio-Cortez enriches herself through campaign finance violations and progressive grift. We've established that she destroys economic opportunities for the working-class people she claims to represent. Now, let's discuss how she abandoned those constituents entirely while building her celebrity brand. AOC sat at the witness table, face pale, hands trembling slightly, unable to defend herself against any of it. Because every fact Shapiro presented was documented, verifiable, undeniable. Her own words, her own decisions, her own record of corruption, destruction, and abandonment, and he wasn't done yet. Shapiro's voice shifted again, taking on a quality of cold fury that was somehow more devastating than if he'd been shouting. Let's discuss constituent services, the boring work of being a representative, answering phone calls, helping with federal agencies, solving problems for the people who elected you. The work that doesn't generate Instagram content but actually helps people. He pulled out a congressional report, public data that anyone could access. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office has the worst constituent response rate in Congress. Not one of the worst. The worst, period. Average response time to constituent inquiries, 6 weeks. The national congressional average, 3 days. 6 weeks versus 3 days. Shapiro let those numbers sink in. Why? Why does it take 6 weeks for her office to respond when most congressional offices respond in 3 days? Because responding to constituents doesn't build her brand. It doesn't create viral content. It doesn't make her famous, so she doesn't do it. He pulled out letters, emails, voicemails, documentation of constituent attempts to reach AOC's office. Not to read them all, which would be boring, but to show the physical stack of ignored requests. These represent hundreds of constituents who needed help with Medicare, with Social Security, with VA benefits, with immigration paperwork. Basic services that congressional offices are supposed to provide. Shapiro held up one letter specifically. Elena Ruiz, 73 years old, couldn't navigate Medicare enrollment. Called Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office 12 times over 3 months. 12 times. Never received a call back. Eventually, in desperation, she called a Republican congressman's office, not even her representative, and they helped her in 1 week. 1 week to solve a problem that AOC's office ignored for 3 months. Another letter. David Kim, small business owner, needed help with an SBA loan application during COVID. Called 9 times over 2 months. Got exactly 1 form letter response. Automated, generic, useless. His business closed. He's working night shift at a warehouse now, trying to pay off debts from a business that might have survived if his congresswoman had answered his calls. Shapiro placed the letters down with the other evidence, building a monument to neglect. Why couldn't Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office help these people? Why were they too busy to respond? Let me show you what they were busy with. He pulled out a different kind of documentation. AOC's public schedule, her media appearances, her celebrity activities. During the same period, Elena Ruiz was calling 12 times. Representative Ocasio-Cortez was filming a Netflix documentary, doing a Vogue magazine photo shoot, attending Fashion Week, recording podcast episodes, doing a book tour, attending the Met Gala, and making approximately 47 Instagram posts about various progressive causes. His delivery accelerated into machine gun territory. She had time for Netflix, but not for Elena. Time for Vogue, but not for David. Time for Fashion Week, but not for her constituents. Time to attend a 35 gala, but not to answer phone calls from elderly people who needed help navigating Medicare. A middle-aged man stood in the gallery, Puerto Rican, maybe 50, wearing a simple button-down shirt that had been washed so many times the collar was fraying. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd built something with his own hands and watched it crumble. "Sir," Shapiro paused, giving him space. "My name is Carlos Rodriguez," the man said, his accent thick, his voice carrying the weight of loss. "My family owned a restaurant in the Bronx. Rodriguez Family Restaurant. Traditional Puerto Rican food. My grandfather opened it in 1981. 42 years of family business. 3 generations of work." He pulled worn photographs from his pocket, pictures of the restaurant in its prime, full of customers, vibrant and alive. "COVID destroyed us. We closed during the lockdowns. We supported them, understood they were necessary, but we needed help. The PP loans, the EIDL programs, all these acronyms and forms and requirements we didn't understand. We're good at cooking food and serving families, not navigating government bureaucracy." Carlos's voice wavered but held. "I called Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. She represents us. I thought she would help us. She's Puerto Rican like us. She talks about supporting small businesses and working families. I called 8 times over 4 months. Left messages explaining our situation, asking for help, understanding the relief programs, begging for someone to call us back." He held up the photographs, and the cameras captured the contrast, images of a thriving family business, now just memories. No one ever called back. Not once. But I saw Representative Ocasio-Cortez on television, at celebrity events, at fashion shows, giving speeches about supporting working people and small businesses. She had time for that. No time for us. Carlos's voice broke. We lost the restaurant. 42 years. My grandfather's dream. My father's life's work. What I was supposed to pass to my children. Gone. Because we couldn't navigate the relief programs alone, and our congresswoman was too busy being famous to help us. He looked at AOC, and tears ran down his face unashamedly. My father died 6 months after we closed. Heart attack, the doctor said, but I know what really killed him. Watching his life's work disappear, while the person who promised to represent us was too busy taking selfies with celebrities. The photographs slipped from Carlos's hands, fluttered to the floor between the witness table and the gallery. Images of a family restaurant, a community gathering place, a Puerto Rican success story, now just closed memories because a congresswoman couldn't be bothered to return phone calls. Shapiro didn't pick up the photographs. Let them lie there as evidence, as accusation, as the human cost of celebrity over service. He gave Carlos Rodriguez's testimony the silence it deserved before continuing. Carlos Rodriguez represents hundreds of small business owners in Representative Ocasio-Cortez's district who lost everything during COVID, not because there wasn't help available, but because they couldn't navigate the complex federal programs alone, and their congresswoman's office wouldn't help them. She was too busy building her brand to do her job. He pulled out crime statistics, but immediately pivoted to stories rather than numbers. Let's discuss safety. Representative Ocasio-Cortez supported the Defund the Police movement proudly, vocally, repeatedly. Shapiro showed her tweets, her speeches, her media appearances advocating for reducing police funding. Here's what happened in her district after police funding was cut and officers left the force in record numbers. Mrs. Chen's corner store, been there 30 years, robbed 3 times in 6 months. Police response time used to be 8 minutes, now it's 45 minutes. She's thinking about closing, leaving the community without one of its few remaining small businesses. Another story. The subway station at Jackson Heights. 4 violent assaults in 3 months. Constituents afraid to commute. They wanted more police presence. Representative Ocasio-Cortez suggested more social workers. They needed safety. She gave them theory. Shapiro's voice carried genuine anger now, controlled but unmistakable. While crime increased in her district, while her constituents felt unsafe in their own neighborhoods, Representative Ocasio-Cortez was on progressive podcasts discussing abolishing prisons and reimagining public safety. Her constituents needed protection. She gave them performance activism. He gathered his documents, preparing for his closing argument. So, let's summarize Representative Ocasio-Cortez's record. She puts her boyfriend on the campaign payroll for $6 million, while volunteers work for free. She kills 25,000 union jobs for Instagram clout. She gets rich from climate activism while creating 0 green jobs. She ignores constituents' calls to while attending celebrity events. She lets small businesses collapse while filming Netflix documentaries. She allows crime to increase while advocating for defunding police. Shapiro stood, and his voice carried absolute certainty. Representative Ocasio-Cortez attacked me at the beginning of this hearing, called me a fascist, a propagandist, dangerous to democracy. But I'm a commentator. I give opinions people choose to consume or ignore. She's a congresswoman. She has actual power over actual people's lives, and she's abused that power to enrich herself while destroying the lives of the working-class people she claims to represent. He looked directly at AOC for the final time. Between the two of us, Representative, who's actually dangerous? The question hung in the air, unanswerable, devastating, final. Shapiro remained standing, gathered his documents with precise movements, and delivered his closing with the rapid-fire precision that had made him famous. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, you began this hearing by attacking me. You called me a fascist propagandist, enabling Trump's authoritarianism. You questioned my character, my integrity, my relationship with my Jewish faith. You suggested I profit from spreading hatred and undermining democracy. He placed his hand flat on the stack of evidence he'd presented. I've responded not with insults, but with your record. Not with opinions, but with facts. Not with feelings, but with documentation. His delivery accelerated, each point a hammer blow. $6 million to your boyfriend for undefined consulting work that produced 0 deliverables. 25,000 union jobs killed because opposing Amazon made you look revolutionary. Millions earned from Green New Deal book deals and speaking tours, while the policy created 0 jobs. Worst constituent response rate in Congress because you're too busy being a celebrity to answer calls. Small businesses collapsing while you film Netflix documentaries. Crime increasing while you advocate for defunding police. Shapiro paused, let the accumulation of evidence settle, then delivered his judgment. You're not a socialist representative. Socialists believe in collective ownership and shared resources. You believe in enriching yourself while using progressive rhetoric. You're not even a progressive. Progressives believe in using government power to improve people's lives. You use government power to build your personal brand. His voice dropped, became colder. You're a narcissist who found a profitable niche. You discovered you could market performance activism, that you could get rich from pretending to fight for the working class while actually exploiting them. You're everything you claim to oppose. Corruption, self-enrichment at the time, pensioning to constituents. You just have better Instagram captions. Shapiro began gathering his materials, preparing to sit down, but delivered one final line. You called me dangerous to democracy, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, but I'm a commentator expressing opinions. You're a congresswoman abusing power. You're a celebrity who forgot to do your job. You're a fraud who used people's hopes for your own enrichment. He looked at her one last time and delivered his signature line with perfect timing. Facts don't care about your feelings, Representative. And these facts destroy your career. He sat down. No triumph in his expression. No satisfaction. Just the calm composure of someone who'd presented a case, made his argument, and knew the evidence spoke for itself. AOC sat frozen for a moment, then stood on shaky legs. Her voice, when she spoke, carried defensive desperation. This is character assassination. It's your record, Shapiro interrupted calmly, not even looking at her. She tried again. You're taking things out of context. Which fact was out of context? He looked up now, genuinely curious. The $6 million to your boyfriend, the 25,000 jobs you killed, the constituents that you ignored. Which specific fact did I misrepresent? AOC opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. She couldn't point to a single fact he'd gotten wrong because he hadn't gotten anything wrong. It was all true, all documented, All her own words and decisions and consequences. She tried one more desperate defense. This is exactly what I was talking about. Right-wing attacks on strong women of color who, 3 people testified against you today. Shapiro cut her off, his voice carrying absolute finality. Jennifer Martinez, a young woman who volunteered for your campaign. Marcus Thompson, a union worker from Queens. Carlos Rodriguez, a Puerto Rican small business owner. 2 women and a Latino man from your own district, your own demographic, your own community. This isn't a right-wing attack, Representative. This is accountability from the people you betrayed. He delivered the killing blow. Try again. AOC sat down, defeated. No defense had worked. Every attack had been parried. Every excuse had been dismantled. She was exposed, destroyed, finished, not by partisan attacks, but by her own record laid bare for everyone to see. Chairman Comer, looking like he wished he was anywhere else, gavelled the hearing to a close. This hearing is adjourned. The gallery emptied quickly. The progressive supporters who remained fled, unable to defend what they'd witnessed, unwilling to be associated with AOC's collapse. Conservative media rushed out to file stories. Cameras captured AOC sitting alone at the witness table, physically unable to move, emotionally unable to process what had just happened. Her phone on the table began buzzing, once, twice, then continuously. A relentless vibration of incoming notifications. She glanced at the screen and immediately looked away, unable to face what she was seeing. Twitter was exploding. #FactsDon'tCare was trending worldwide. The video of Shapiro's systematic destruction had already been clipped, edited, uploaded, and was going mega viral. Within an hour, it would have 10 million views. By the end of the day, 50 million. The clip of AOC trying to claim character assassination and Shapiro calmly responding, "It's your record," would become one of the most shared political moments of the year. Even friendly media couldn't defend her. MSNBC's Chiron read, Ocasio-Cortez faces tough questioning on record. CNN played the exchange on loop with commentary about accountability questions for progressive representatives. The narrative had flipped so completely and so quickly that even her usual defenders were scrambling to distance themselves. By evening, squad members were issuing carefully worded statements, not supporting her, not condemning her, just vague platitudes about everyone being accountable for their record, and the importance of constituent services. The message was clear. She was on her own. By the next morning, Democratic Party leadership was having quiet conversations about potential ethics investigations, about campaign finance violations, about whether AOC had become more liability than asset. By the end of the week, a primary challenger had emerged. Maria Santos, a community organizer who'd lived in the Bronx her entire life, announced she was running with a simple message. Your representative should answer your calls and help you, not build a celebrity brand while you suffer. Early polling showed Santos leading by 18 points. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had attacked Ben Shapiro, thinking she'd humiliate him, destroy him, show the world who had real power. Instead, she'd given him a platform to systematically dismantle her entire career using nothing but facts, evidence, and her own words. She'd tried to fight logic with emotion, tried to counter facts with feelings, tried to defend corruption with accusations of partisanship, and she'd learned the hard way what millions of people already knew. Facts don't care about your feelings. January 2026. The Democratic primary in New York's 14th district was still months away. but the outcome already felt inevitable. Maria Santos led Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in every poll, usually by double digits. The squad's most famous member was heading toward a humiliating defeat, and everyone knew it. AOC still maintained her social media presence, still posted about progressive causes, still tried to project the image of a congresswoman fighting for the people. But the engagement numbers told a different story. Followers declining, likes decreasing, comments sections filled with variations of, "Remember when Shapiro destroyed you?" The speaking invitations had dried up. The media appearances became less frequent. The celebrity friends stopped calling. The progressive organizations that had once celebrated her now kept their distance, recognizing that AOC had become toxic to associate with. She'd tried to mount a defense in the weeks after the hearing, claimed she was being targeted for being a strong woman of color, insisted Shapiro had taken things out of context, argued that the attacks were politically motivated. None of it worked, because Shapiro hadn't attacked her. He'd simply presented her record, and that record was indefensible. Ben Shapiro, for his part, returned to his regular work. The Daily Wire, his podcast, his commentary, business as usual. The clip of him destroying AOC became one of the most watched political videos of the year. Used in countless compilations, referenced endlessly, his "Facts don't care about your feelings" line renewed as a meme and a cultural touchstone. When asked about it in interviews, Shapiro was characteristically direct. Representative Ocasio-Cortez attacked me personally. I responded with her record. That's not an attack. That's accountability. She enherdited herself while claiming to fight for working people. She killed jobs while pretending to create them. She ignored constituents while building a celebrity brand. Those are facts. And facts, as I always say, don't care about her feelings about being exposed. Jennifer Martinez, the campaign volunteer who testified, was now working for Maria Santos's campaign. "This time, I'm working for someone who actually cares about helping people instead of becoming famous," she told reporters. Maria answers her phone. She shows up to community meetings. She does the work. That's what representation is supposed to look like. Marcus Thompson, the union electrician, found a construction job closer to home, not in Queens, since Amazon never came back, but close enough that his commute dropped from 4 hours to 90 minutes. "Still wish I had that Amazon job," he told a local newspaper, still angry at Ocasio-Cortez for killing it. "But at least now we might get a representative who actually represents us instead of using us as content for their Instagram." Carlos Rodriguez had given up on reopening his restaurant. The dream of passing his grandfather's legacy to his children died with the business. He started a food truck instead. Smaller, more manageable. No longer the community gathering place his family had built over 42 years, but something. "I serve the same recipes my grandfather created," he said quietly. "People tell me they miss the restaurant. I tell them to remember that when they vote. Remember who helped them and who abandoned them." The lesson was clear, written in the wreckage of a political career that had seemed unstoppable just months before. Performance activism eventually meets accountability. Celebrity eventually faces consequences. And when someone who's built their brand on fighting corruption gets exposed as corrupt themselves, the fall is swift and final. Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez had wanted to be remembered as a revolutionary, a voice for the voiceless, a champion of the working class. Instead, she'd be remembered as the congresswoman who attacked Ben Shapiro, and got destroyed by her own record, who enriched herself while preaching socialism, who killed jobs while building her brand, who ignored constituents while becoming a celebrity. She'd be remembered as the politician who tried to fight facts with feelings and learned that facts always win. In the end, Ben Shapiro had taught America a lesson it already knew, but sometimes forgot. Stay calm. Present evidence. Let the facts speak. Don't get emotional when someone attacks you personally. Just respond with their record. Logic beats hysteria. Facts beat feelings. Calm destroys chaos. And sometimes the best revenge against someone who attacks you is simply telling the truth about them. Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez attacked first. Ben Shapiro responded with facts. She lost. He won. Because in the end, always, inevitably, facts don't care about your feelings, and no amount of progressive rhetoric, no volume of social media followers, no quantity of celebrity status can protect you when someone calmly, precisely, systematically presents the truth about who you are and what you've done. The squad's most famous member learned that lesson in the most public, most humiliating way possible. And America watched, remembered, and understood. Truth matters. Facts matter. Records matter. Performance is temporary. Reality is permanent. And eventually, always, the receipts come due.